Never outshine the master. Always make those who reign feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please them or impress them, do not go too far in showing off your talents, or you risk the opposite, instilling fear and insecurity in them. Make your superiors appear more brilliant than they are, and you will achieve your goal. Nicolas Fouquet, Minister of Finance during the early years of Louis XIV's reign, was a generous man who loved lavish balls, beautiful women, and poetry. He also loved money, as his lifestyle required extravagance. Fouquet was intelligent and absolutely indispensable to the king, so when the first minister, Julio Mazarin, died in 1661, Fouquet could reasonably expect to become his successor. However, the king decided to abolish the post of first minister altogether. Because of this and other signs, Fouquet suspected that he was losing favor and decided to make a bold attempt to regain the king's goodwill by hosting the most sumptuous festival the world had ever seen. Officially, the occasion was to celebrate the completion of Fouquet's chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, but the true purpose was to pay tribute to the king. The most brilliant nobles of Europe and the greatest minds of the time, La Fontaine, La Rochefoucauld, Madame de Sévigné, attended. Molière wrote a play for the occasion, which he himself performed that evening. The celebration began with a magnificent 7-course dinner, featuring exotic Eastern dishes previously unknown in France and other extraordinary delicacies prepared especially for that night. The dinner was accompanied by music commissioned by Fouquet in the king's honor. After dinner, guests strolled through the gardens. The flower beds and fountains of Vaux-le-Vicomte would later serve as inspiration for the creation of Versailles. Fouquet himself accompanied the young king along geometrically aligned paths, bordered by hedges and flower beds. On the canal banks, they admired a spectacular fireworks show, after which Molière's play was performed. The festival continued throughout the night, and everyone agreed it was the most astonishing spectacle they had ever seen. The next day, Fouquet was arrested by the captain of the king's musketeers, D'Artagnan. 3 months later, he was brought to trial for stealing from the royal treasury. In reality, most of what he had taken had been borrowed with the king's consent. Fouquet was found guilty and imprisoned in the most remote fortress in France, high in the Pyrenees, where he spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. Louis XIV, the Sun King, was an arrogant and haughty man. He always sought to be the center of attention and could not allow anyone, especially his own finance minister, to surpass him in luxury. Fouquet had hoped that his grand celebration would earn him greater favor, but in reality, it only made Louis feel humiliated and threatened. Louis decided to make Jean-Baptiste Colbert his new finance minister, a man known for his thriftiness and for his plain, austere lifestyle. Colbert ensured that all the royal treasury's money went directly into the king's hands. With these funds, Louis XIV built a palace even more splendid than Vaux-le-Vicomte, the famous Palace of Versailles. He employed the very same architects, decorators, and gardeners who had worked for Fouquet. The celebrations at Versailles would be even grander and more luxurious than the one Fouquet had paid for with his freedom. Let's examine the situation. On the evening when Fouquet amazed Louis with a cascade of spectacles, each one outshining the previous, Fouquet believed he was showing his loyalty and devotion to the king. He neither expected that the celebration would cost him the king's favor, nor did he imagine that displaying his refined taste, connections, and popularity would make him indispensable to the king and prove that he was an excellent candidate for first minister. In reality, however, each new spectacle and every delighted smile on Fouquet's guests' faces aroused suspicion in Louis that his own friends and subjects were more enchanted by the finance minister than by the king himself. That Fouquet, in essence, had stolen his wealth and power. Instead of flattering Louis XIV, Fouquet's exquisite celebration wounded his pride and insulted the royal dignity. Naturally,
Louis would not reveal the truth to anyone. Instead, he found a suitable pretext to get rid of the man who, unintentionally, made him feel insecure. Such is the fate, in one form or another, of all who shake the ruler's confidence, wound his vanity, or cause him to doubt his superiority. When the festival began, Fouquet was at the height of the world. By the time it ended, he was at the bottom.
In the early 1600s, Italian astronomer and mathematician Galileo found himself in a delicate position. The generosity of powerful patrons was crucial for him to continue his research. Like all Renaissance scientists, he sometimes dedicated his inventions or discoveries to the most influential patrons. For example, he once presented a military compass he invented to the Duke of Gonzaga. Another time, he dedicated a book explaining how to use this instrument to the Medici family. On the one hand, it was flattering to the patrons. On the other, it allowed Galileo to attract more students and financial support. Regardless of the importance of the discovery, patrons usually rewarded him with gifts. Paying him in cash was considered inappropriate. Of course, this left Galileo living in constant uncertainty. Eventually, he decided to look for an easier way.
He put this new strategy into practice in 1610, when he discovered Jupiter's moons. Instead of splitting his discovery between different patrons, presenting the telescope to one, dedicating the book to another, as he had done before, he focused all his efforts on the Medici. Galileo chose the Medici for one key reason. After Cosimo I founded the Medici dynasty in 1540, he adopted Jupiter, the most powerful of all gods, as the emblem of the family.
It was a symbol of power that went beyond mere politics and money, reaching back to the grandeur of ancient Rome and its deities. Galileo presented the discovery of Jupiter's moons as a cosmic event celebrating the greatness of the Medici. Shortly after the discovery, he declared that these bright stars had appeared before his telescope at the very moment of Cosimo II's coronation. He announced that the number of moons, 4, matched the number of Medici brothers. Cosimo II had 3 brothers. Furthermore, these moons orbited Jupiter, just as the 4 suns orbited Cosimo I, the dynasty's founder. This was more than coincidence. It suggested that the very heavens reflected the rise of the Medici. Once he had dedicated the discovery to the Medici, Galileo designed an emblem that depicted Jupiter seated on a cloud, surrounded by 4 stars. He presented it to Cosimo II as a symbol of his celestial connection. In 1610, Cosimo II officially appointed Galileo as his court philosopher and mathematician at a full salary. For Galileo, this was a vital stroke of fortune. The days of humbly begging for patronage were finally over. With this one bold move, his new strategy, Galileo achieved more than he ever had during all those years of humbly petitioning patrons. The reason is simple: those who hold power care little for science, empirical truths, or new inventions. What they care about most is their own fame and legacy. By connecting the Medici name to the stars themselves, Galileo gave them a grandeur far greater than any scientific instrument or discovery could have. Scientists, like everyone else, must navigate the peculiarities of court life. They, too, must serve the masters who control the purse strings, and their sharp intellects can make a patron feel vulnerable, as if they are merely a source of money, an unpleasant and unflattering role. Every patron secretly longs to be seen, just as a provider of material resources, but as a creative and shining figure, someone more important than the work commissioned in their name. Galileo never challenged the intellectual status of the Medici. He never made them feel inferior or merely instrumental. Instead, by tying their name to the moons of Jupiter, he allowed them to blaze gloriously across the Italian courts. He did not outshine his patrons. He made them shine all the more. Everyone has their insecurities. When you go out into the world and show your talents, you may face envy, resentment, or other signs of insecurity. That's unavoidable. But with those who stand above you, those who can shape your future, you must take a different approach. When it comes to power, to outshine one's superior is one of the most foolish and dangerous mistakes. Never fool yourself into thinking that times have changed much since Louis XIV or the Medici. Those at the top still wish to feel like kings and queens. They want to believe they surpass everyone in brilliance and charm. The most common and most dangerous mistake is to assume that by demonstrating your talents and cleverness, you will earn your master's respect or approval. Even if they thank you, they will quietly look for a replacement who is less brilliant and less threatening, just as Louis XIV chose the modest Colbert over the dazzling Fouquet. And they will never confess the real reason for their decision. They will simply invent an excuse to remove you. This law contains two rules that must be remembered. First, you can outshine a superior completely unintentionally, simply by being yourself. Among those above you, some are more insecure than others. Some are immensely, even monstrously, insecure. You can overshadow them with your charm and talent without the slightest effort on your part. There was no one as naturally gifted as Astori Manfredi, Prince of Forenza. The most handsome of all the young Italian princes, he captivated everyone with his generosity and sincerity. In 1500, Cesare Borgia laid siege to Forenza. When the city was surrounded, its citizens expected the worst from the ruthless Borgia, but he merely took control of the fortifications, spared the townspeople, and allowed 18-year-old Astori to keep his liberty and his entire court. Soon afterward, however, Astori Manfredi was escorted to a Roman prison. A year later, his body was found in the Tiber, weighted down with a stone tied around his neck. Borgia had justified this monstrous act with a fabricated accusation of treason against the state. But the real reason lay deeper. Cesare Borgia was a vain and profoundly insecure man. Manfredi, simply by existing, was a threat to him. Astori was so naturally gifted that Borgia feared losing his own allure and charisma in comparison. The lesson is straightforward. If you cannot hide your natural charm and brilliance, avoid contact with such monstrous egotists. And if contact is unavoidable, do your best not to display your qualities in the presence of a Cesare Borgia. Second, never assume that because your master loves you, you are free to do as you please. Countless favorites have fallen from grace simply because they thought they were so beloved that they could surpass their master. In late 16th century Japan, Senno Riki was the tea master of the powerful ruler, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Tea ceremonies were highly fashionable among the nobility at that time. Riki became one of Hideyoshi's most trusted advisors. He had his own quarters in the palace and was celebrated across Japan for his exquisite taste and ceremony. But in 1591, by order of Hideyoshi, Riki was arrested and condemned to death. He was permitted to take his own life. The reason for this abrupt downfall was discovered later. Riki, once a simple peasant who had risen to the highest circles, had commissioned a wooden statue of himself in a regal pose, wearing sandals, a symbol of aristocratic rank. He had arranged for this statue to be placed in the most prominent temple within the palace gates, where the royal family often passed by. For Hideyoshi, this was a blatant display of arrogance. Riki had forgotten that his status depended entirely on his master and dared to imagine himself on an equal level. This unforgivable overestimation of his own importance cost him his life. Remember, never grow too comfortable in your position, and never assume that any favor shown to you is truly yours by right. Knowing how dangerous it is to outshine your ruler, you can turn this law to your advantage. First and foremost, you must flatter and inflate your master's ego. Open flattery can be effective, but has its limits. It is too direct and obvious, and looks bad in the eyes of other courtiers. For example, if you are smarter than your master, try to make it appear otherwise. Let him seem wiser than you. Pretend to be naive. Show that you need his experience. Make harmless mistakes that will not harm you later, but will give you a reason to ask for his help. Masters love such requests. A lord deprived of the chance to pour out the treasures of his experience on you may instead direct his anger and resentment towards you. If you think more creatively than your master, attribute your ideas to him, preferably publicly. Make it clear that your recommendations are merely echoes of his suggestions. If you surpass your mastering wit, you can play the part of a court jester, but so that he does not appear dull or simple-minded next to you. If necessary, hold back your humor and find a way to make him look like the source of joy and amusement. If you are naturally more sociable or generous than your master, carefully avoid becoming a cloud that obscures his radiance to others. He must appear like the sun, radiating power and magnificence, and be the center of attention. If you have the honor of entertaining him, displaying your limited talents will help you win his favor. Any attempt to dazzle him with your talents and elegance can be fatal. Learn from Fouquet's mistake, so you don't pay the price yourself. In all these cases, hiding your strength does not mean weakness. On the contrary, it leads to power. By letting others outshine you, you continue to control the situation instead of becoming a victim of their insecurity. All of this will be useful when the day comes for you to rise to a higher level. If, like Galileo, you can help your Lord shine even brighter in the eyes of others, you are simply a gift from the gods and will rise immediately. There can be only one sun in the sky. Never block the sunlight or compete with the brilliance of the star. Better to fade, disappear from the sky, and find a way to increase your master's glow.
Try not to outshine the master. Any kind of superiority is hateful, but the superiority of a vassal over his prince is not only foolish, it is fatal. This is the lesson the stars in the sky teach us. They may be akin to the sun and shine just as brightly, but they never appear in its company.
You should not worry about every person you have quarreled with, but you must be selectively tough. If your master's star is setting, you need not fear outshining him. Do not be merciful. Your master did not bother with such trifles when he himself was climbing coldly to the top. Assess his strength. If he is weak, hasten his fall. At the right moment, show that you surpass him in business skills, charm, and intellect. If he is very weak and about to fall, let nature take its course. Pushing aside a greatly weakened lord risks making you seem cruel or dishonorable. Do not do this. If your master still stands firmly, and only you know you are more capable, be patient and wait. The natural course of things is that power eventually fades and weakens. The Lord will fall one day, and if you play your cards right, you will outshine him.